Hey fam, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of The Witness Wore Red, The 19th Wife Who Brought Polygamous Cult Leaders to Justice by Rebecca Musser with M. Bridget Cook. Do me a favor, hit the like button and hype me up as we jump into chapter 11. Oh, the title alone. Another child bride. Breed 'em and break 'em. Like, we're not even a sentence in, and I'm disgusted just because of the title, and that is what essentially they're doing. Though the church leadership was well protected by local law enforcement, it seemed apparent that the state and federal governments were starting to crack down on our people. Warren said we were being harassed, and nearly every Sunday in church, leaders reported on the growing external pressure we were facing from lawsuits, depositions, and tax fraud investigations. The United Effort Plan, or UEP, which had originally been set up by church officials in 1942 to control homes, some businesses, and land within the towns of Short Creek and eventually all other FLDS enclaves, was part of Living the United Order, or the Law of Consecration, the same law under which my father had signed his Salt Lake house over to the church. Loyal families did not own their homes, but rather lived in them by special invitation of the church which owned the land. Does this make sense? That this home that you're paying on, this home that you're making the monthly payments on, isn't yours. And when it does become yours, you sign it over to the church. And that same church can pick and choose whether or not you even deserve to stay in the home. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. The prophet, as president, had total control over the homes on the land and therefore all temporal, earthly blessings regarding the people. Those at odds with the priesthood, especially those at odds with Warren, would find themselves with no house to live in. The few brave enough not to leave when ordered to discover they had no running water, electricity, or gas which to sustain their families. So I don't remember if it was in this book, but I think I've said it in others, like, why not just go? Or why did you stick by with all this stuff? They really and truly have no other choice in some instances. They can't even stay in these homes that they once owned, because if they do, then he cuts off their utilities. It's so much control. It is so much control. If they still stayed, a visit from the God Squad usually did the trick. Uncle Fred ran his house in much the same way, and he decided the fate of each young person under his roof with cold disregard for their wishes or needs. After my brothers were banished or escaped, Fred decided my little sister, Eliza, only 13, was ready for marriage. At 13. It's like, would her mom have been better off with this father and her husband who was assaulting her kids, abusing her kids, being mean to her kids, or in this situation where the guys are getting kicked out and the daughters are being basically sold? This is, I don't know. This is so, like, what in the world? When it was announced it would be to Alan Steed, I was even more appalled. Alan was not only our first cousin, he had been exceptionally cruel to Eliza the winter she was young, sick, and vulnerable on the Steed Ranch. I couldn't see that he had matured since then. What an... I got a lot of first cousins, and they're fine. Like, my family is, yes, we have some good looking men. With that being said, the thought of me having to marry them, Ain't no way. No way. No, 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 no. And here she is at 13 on top of it being told she's to marry her cousin, who is her first cousin, who's also mean to her. Eliza spoke with Uncle Fred several times to beg him to see reason and give her just 2 more years before marrying. However, he was adamant she be plucked immediately. Alan had done a lot of work for Uncle Fred, and Eliza seemed to be his reward. Fred also wanted Eliza safely married off before she could rebel as our brothers had. When she pointed out that Alan was her first cousin, Fred admonished her, "These things make no difference in matters of the Lord." I would beg to differ. Especially when you see what happens when there's close familiar relations, when family combines their genetics and there are deformities and things of that nature because of that. I don't feel like it was intended for there to be, I believe it's called inbreeding. I don't believe that. Though bloodlines among the people were usually considered in regard to marriage, if the prophet directed it, it was believed God would honor the union. Biological and scientific issues would not come to pass as long as the couple had enough faith. Isn't that the answer for everything? Because if something does happen, it's your fault because you didn't have enough faith. Not the fact that y'all were doing stuff that you had no business doing and that's why it happened. But it's because you didn't have enough faith. Christine, Mom, and I were highly disturbed at the whole situation. But as women, we had absolutely no say. The ceremony was to take place almost immediately following her 14th birthday, and Warren had already directed me to help Mom make Alyssa's wedding dress. As a last resort, she made an appointment to see the prophet, which meant that she would talk to Warren and only shake Rulon's hand. The day she came to visit Rulon, I was the head cook, and I greeted her in the driveway, hugging her and wishing her luck before returning to my duties. I was in the dining room with Rulon when Warren strode through the French doors and asked if Eliza Wall could shake our prophet's hand. Rulon motioned for her to come in. I watched Alyssa kneel before, the prophet, taking his hand, but pleading with her eyes and speaking softly to him with Warren's narrow gaze locked on her. I held my breath. I could tell it hadn't gone well in Warren's office because Warren is going to do what Warren wants to do. And Warren wants to marry her off, probably because he in some type of way benefits from doing this as well, because this is what these men do. I'm trying to be a good girl and do what I'm told, Eliza told Rulon, but I need more time. Rulon smiled and patted her hand. Follow your heart, sweetheart, he said. Just follow your heart. Eliza looked at me and our eyes both filled with relief. Warren looked livid. After lunch, Eliza went back to Uncle Fred's to tell him what the prophet had said and ask again for more time. He refused. I don't know why, I don't know why I keep calling this girl Eliza when her name's Alyssa, but y'all know who I'm talking about. I just thought about it while I was sneezing. Where was I? He refused, very unhappy that she questioned his authority. He threatened that if she rejected his blessing now, she might not ever get another chance to marry ever. For a girl in Uncle Fred's compound with nowhere else to go, this was a crushing pronouncement. Women were not allowed to live out on their own. This meant if she did not marry, she would always be a ward of another man and shamed for her rebellion. It would have been better off if she called the people and let the people take her away than having to go through all of this. This just seems like it's so messed up. Christine and I made another appointment with Rulon to plead for more time. But when we arrived, Warren was already there. A chill ran down my spine. Rulon sat while Christine and I kneeled at his feet and recounted Alyssa's story to him. He seemed very surprised that Fred was asking Alyssa to marry her own first cousin. He started to become quite upset, at which point Warren stepped in. Uncle Fred has asked that this marriage happen, Father. Oh, replied Rulon. But Father, she is just 14, I exclaimed. Rulon looked at me surprised. Rulon, looked at me in surprise. What the hell is Fred thinking? He bellowed and looked at Warren. Well, Father, he is insisting that this go on. He's asked that this happen, and we want to support him in that. Within moments, it was clear to me what was happening. Warren obviously needed to keep Fred as a political ally. Rulon's eyes became clouded with confusion as Warren kept on, and within minutes, Rulon backed Fred again. My family was crushed, and I was outraged, but Mom and I finished Alyssa's wedding dress, having been admonished by Fred and Warren to make my little sister happy in her, he has it in quotes, she has it in quotes, her decision. Knowing that we had done all women were allowed, I did my best to convince her to be joyful at the will of God, as I was told to say. At her fitting in my mother's room at Uncle Fred's, I struggled to pin the lace precisely into place onto the dress as Alyssa's body heaved with great sobs. I was crying inside. My only consolation was that Alan was not old like my husband and so many others. I did not like him, but I told her that they might perhaps grow to love each other. Silently, I prayed that he would treat her well. As I watched my baby sister being driven away to the Caliente Motel in Nevada, which was now seeing a steady flow of child brides, I wanted to run, scream, yell, and beat on the car. But I had to hold on to the only power I had, the buffer of my husband. If I acted rashly or disobediently, the little help I could give my mother and sisters would come to a screeching halt. Choking back tears, my mother and I soberly decorated the honeymoon hideout, a bedroom next to Mom's in Fred's house that was set aside for Alan and Alyssa. What she was being forced to face that night was not right. It had been horrible for me at 19, and she was still a little girl. Despite the promise he'd made to give her time, Alan forced Alyssa to consummate the marriage almost immediately. Oh my goodness. 14 years old. Doesn't even know her body. Still a child. Doesn't want this. Is being forced into this. And she is violated and forced even more so to do this. Though she didn't say anything for several weeks, we could tell something was drastically wrong. Amelia, whose husband was much younger than mine, knew precisely the questions to ask when she called from Canada, especially, what does he do when you say no? Alyssa opened up to Amelia on the phone, and Mom relayed certain details to me when I snuck over to visit. I confronted Alyssa. She finally admitted to Mom and me that when she told Alan she hated him to touch her, he played on her gullibility, saying he would grow physically ill, even die if she didn't allow him to have sex. The manipulation in this, the lies. So it's okay for him to lie. And it's okay for women to be silenced. And it's okay for them to be assaulted and raped and touched and fondled and kissed and all these other things against their will. But it's not okay for a woman to speak up for herself and be able to say no. And people wonder why people feel the way they feel when it comes to some of these cults. Because I don't feel like all polygamous relationships are cult-like. I don't. But this clearly is a cult. It is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if it offends anybody. This clearly is a cult. It is. Then she finally broke down and admitted that Alan was graping her nearly every night, often and violently. I went to Warren about what he was doing to me, Alyssa said, tears welling in her eyes. He said, go home and follow your priesthood head, because Warren himself does these very same things. This is just a bunch of the same people protecting one another as they do disgusting things to these young ladies and these young men, because it wasn't just the women that they did this to. And she's expected to keep being violated each night. And she, not that it matters her age, because at any age it's wrong. She's only 14. Neither mom nor I was at liberty to tell Alyssa otherwise, especially since we were married to the bishop and prophet, respectively. But when I left to go back to my home and was finally alone in my room, I threw up repeatedly, so nauseated at what Alan was doing to my little sister and Warren's callous disregard for the young girl's pain and grief. Over the next several months, Alyssa spent more and more time in Mom's room at Uncle Fred's massive house when she could get away with not being at her husband's trailer. I visited too in order to get away from Warren, Rulin, and the thoughts that consumed me at home. It seemed like Warren had started tracking my every move, so I had to slip in and out as surreptitiously, am I saying that right? Surreptitiously. Alexa, how do you pronounce Surreptitiously? She don't know. Whatever I said, she's still struggling. As surreptitiously as possible. He started having spies at Fred's check on me, which made me furious. Why is he so invested in her? Why is he so concerned with her movements? Why is he watching her? Why does he have people checking in on her? Like, what's the deal with him and this girl? Why are you so worried about what Rebecca has going on? Is it because you want her? He started having spies at Fred's check on me, which made me furious. I knew because I would come home and Warren would have reports on me. Details that other people will report to him about me whenever I left the Jeffs estate, if I wasn't with only immediate Jeffs family members with Warren's knowledge. Why isn't she allowed to just go visit people? They're all in the same place. She's expected to just stay in the house all day for him to watch her? Or just go and teach and come back? Like, what? It wasn't just at Uncle Fred's house. Soon, the God Squad was watching me around town, noting my comings and goings. I was certainly not the only one the Gestapo-type guards had their eye on. But if I wasn't where Warren thought I was supposed to be, I would hear about it. Warren had a pendant. Warren had a penchant for taking away all of the things he knew gave a person joy. Soon, all of my privileges had been taken away. No more horses, no more four-wheeling. Warren had made sure the keepers of my keys to freedom knew to never allow me access again at the risk of their souls. So does he feel like she's about to leave? Or like, what is he trying to prevent here? Soon, he restricted everything else near and dear to my heart, forbidding dances, operettas, plays, and even parades. Okay, yeah, we did hear this in other stories, how they weren't allowed to have fun. He even took the kids' toys at one point. From the pulpit, Warren demanded stricter rules among the people, like completely forbidding anyone to wear the color red, and reiterating that passion and pleasure in the bedroom were for men only. What in the hell? So it's okay to hurt women, is what that says. And people wonder why I say that Warren Jeffs should have got the death penalty. He should have. As holders of the priesthood, their passion was meant to fulfill God's will. Men could have that as far as I was concerned, but it felt like Warren was taking every last thing from the community that gave a sense of purpose or joy. Times have changed, Warren said at church. We as people must focus on preparing. Father says we are being too light-minded. We must cut down on the laughter. We must restrict traveling for fancy and entertainment. Restrict your camping trips and remind your families that this is a time of focus and preparation. Because if they don't go on trips and they don't do certain things, that's yet another way he can watch them, monitor them, control them. All of this is about control. It is. I didn't want to be rebellious, but I was so tired of being controlled. If I could be involved in any activity outside of the Jeffs home, I would ask my husband for permission. One day I asked Rulon if I could help Christine and some ladies put on a small holiday program for the seniors in the community. Although it contained music, Rulon allowed it, and Warren couldn't override his decision. Arriving home exhausted from rehearsal one night, Christine went directly to her room, not feeling well. Heading over to check our kitchen schedule, I walked through the living room where 8 of my sister wives, including Cecilia and Sylvia, were speaking in low voices. It seemed like cause for concern, so I quickly sat down to see what's wrong. I don't like it when he touches me, Andrea was saying, and he's getting really weird and demanding. Yes, he is, said another, and most of the group nodded. They were obviously talking about Rulon, who had resorted to even more bizarre behavior if that was possible. Worse, he had lost whatever minor inhibitions he once had and was behaving in gross and lewd ways, with no regard as to who was around while he did these things. Now, I didn't think she was going to be saying Rulon was doing this. I thought she was going to say it was Warren, so this is interesting to hear. Sylvia explained that she and another sister wife had been in a room with Rulon when he had started to undress her, making her go bare all the way down to the waist and expecting her to be open to his caress. I kept saying, Father, no, no, but he kept pushing my hands away, she said. When the other wife went to leave, Father wouldn't let her. He demanded she stay in the room as he was doing this to me. She burst into tears. Oh, this is heavy. I'm only going to be able to read this one chapter. This is heavy. This is going to be a short reading, y'all. My heart goes out. Because unless you've been in I can't even say that. I was going to say unless you've been through this, a situation similar, had someone touch you inappropriately without permission and things of that nature. I think anybody who has any type of conscience, anybody who cares about others, any person who's actually human and isn't evil would know better than to put somebody in a position where you're harming them in this way. And as I am reading this, I'm very upset because this is still going on. And because once you've been violated, it changes things. And to those of you out there in the sound of my voice who've had that happen to you, I'm so sorry. Understand more than ever, you are not alone. I get it. And I know how hard it is to overcome some of those things. And I know that even years later, sometimes certain smells or touches can be triggering. So I'm reading this and I'm just, it bothers me. It really, really bothers me. She burst into tears. I can't stand him to touch me, said Emma, nodding. She was one of Rulon's newer wives. He's so far past childbearing age. How can he be allowed to touch me? What do you think, Becky? Diana asked. I stood up abruptly. I had to get out of there. I think you guys are going to get in severe trouble. I'm going because I don't get away with anything. I left without saying another word. While it was a relief to know that several of my sister wives felt as I did, I couldn't take the chance of stirring up more trouble with Warren. So here she is, and she can relate, and she's had certain things happen to her too. But because people are telling on her and because he constantly has an eye on her, she can't even be vulnerable with her sister wives in this moment and tell the stuff that she's been through because she risks what may be told to Warren. Oh, it's yeah. The next day, flu and pneumonia hit our house, and Fred's with a vengeance. I was nursing Alyssa, who was in my room, and Christine in her own. They were both so sick. I spent most of the morning running back and forth between the kitchen, the bathroom, and their rooms. Mother Becky, call 600. That was Warren's extension. I reacted with my usual, what did I do now? And dialed from the kitchen phone. Warren's voice came over the line. Mother Becky, I need to see you in my office. Why? I asked. I'm in the kitchen. I heard you were involved in a conversation. See? She didn't even say anything and she walked out and she's still getting called in. So who said something? I didn't say anything, I said. I just came upon the conversation. I didn't have anything to do with it. You didn't say anything? Nope. I want you to come talk to me right now. He was fishing. I can't. I'm getting some enemas ready for some very sick people, I replied. It was true, but I hope that comment would gross him out. I'm going to have to talk. It was true. I thought it said it was. Okay, it was true, but I hope that comment would gross him out. I'm going to have to talk to you later. I don't have time right now. I hung up on him, too sleep-deprived to care. Yes, I could have added plenty to the wives' discussion, but I was determined to be a good prophet's wife. I might not have liked what had been dished out on my plate, but I was committed to show God that I would endure it. That day, I left the kitchen armed with enemas, compresses, and a little more grit and determination to endure. My mother would be so proud. Oh, wow. I don't know if that's a good thing. I really, really don't. I don't know if it's a good thing that she's determined and she has grit and all that other stuff. Okay, y'all, I lied. I'm going to read another one because I don't want to leave. Some of you only come for the chapter readings, and I don't want to leave y'all hanging with only 28 minutes. So here we go. Chapter 12, From the Frying Pan into the Fire. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, my friend Samantha paged me while I was with the family waiting for breakfast prayer. Terrorists had used commercial airplanes to attack the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the eastern part of the United States, she told me. So we're going from one triggering chapter to another. Oh my goodness. Thousands were dying, both in the planes and in the buildings. For those of you who lost loved ones, if you lost someone, I'm so sorry. I too lost someone, so I get it. Before we even had time to react, the national tragedy played right into the fears by which Warren manipulated our people. We should be rejoicing, Warren announced jubilantly to his father and all of us present as he bounced in for breakfast. Who in their right mind rejoice at the loss of innocent people? You want to rejoice because it fulfills your fake prophecy that you've been telling these people? Terrorists are attacking the government and are leading to the awakening and demise of the evil it has become. I have been terribly saddened by the bits and pieces of coverage filtering in, and my heart was filled with compassion for the families whose loved ones were in the planes and the towers. Exactly. And the first responders and the children and the parents and all the friends and family, like all these people who lost loved ones, whose lives are no more. All the people who lost loved ones who have now this empty space, and you're rejoicing. Was God that heartless in his plan to bring about the end of the world? That thought didn't add much to my faith in this God. Or was it just that people were heartless? People like terrorists, people like Warren, people are heartless. That's what I'm going with. Every day, Warren was rescinding more of our personal freedoms. We had been a strict, God-fearing people, but we had been joyful too. Now fear, suspicion, and paranoia consumed the community, and it worsened as Warren pitted person against person in his power games. A vast, nearly tangible spiritual darkness seemed to settle over us all. At home, there was no way for me to avoid Warren. He was the teacher for good words class at 6 a.m. and morning class at 8 a.m., and he taught the fathers' wives at family class in the evening too. He was at nearly every meal. While the house was massive, it seemed like I would run into him or get called to his office every day. He's a teacher who doesn't even know how to teach. Let's keep that in mind as well. I felt smothered, unable to quietly slip out to see my family or my friend Samantha. One rare day, when I was able to sneak away from the Jeffs property, I went to the bike shop where my mother was having her bike repaired. I stepped inside to see that she and a young man were injecting a green, gooey slime into her tires so they wouldn't go flat. Despite the nasty goat head stickers or puncture veins prevalent throughout town, suddenly the green goo... Did I skip something? No, I didn't. Suddenly, the green goo spewed everywhere, and I watched in amazement as my mother erupted into laughter. It was the first time I had seen her laugh in years. In years, you guys. I laugh every day, multiple times a day. I laugh sometimes, and when I hear myself laugh, I'm like, oh my goodness, my laugh. But it is what it is. Some of you like it, some of you don't. But I'm a laugh because, it helps. Like, laughing is good. And here she is saying that's the first time she heard her mother laugh in years. Goodness gracious. Oh, man. All I could think of was God bless that young man. His name was Benjamin Jeffs Musser. I wonder if that's her husband. I can't remember when she did her I can't remember when she did her dedication, but I'm just saying that's her last name. I had met him soon after I was married to Rulon, but I didn't know him well at all. Although I was known as Grandmother Becky to most young people in town, Ben actually was my grandson, and that he was the grandson of Rulon and my sister wife, Ruth Jessup Jeffs. He was a tall and lanky redhead with the most brilliant blue eyes and the longest eyelashes I had ever seen on a man. But it was his kind countenance I really noticed. As my mother no longer had any sons to help her, Ben and his brother had gone out of their way to do special things for her on several occasions. I was most grateful for how he had made her smile. How I had missed her smile and the smiles of all the women I loved. Several days later, I was called into Warren's office because he had received a report, of course. Oh, I had seen the game all right. Oh, and I had longed to stop and play with 3 or 4 of my sister wives I saw out there having a blast. And oh, I have considered the consequences because of all the trouble I had been in and how Warren had been clapping down on outdoor activities and sports. I had come home only to be shamed and in distress for something I had not done when I was fighting with all my strength to do what is right. So people are lying on her. Your reports are wrong, I said adamantly. I did not stop and play. I knew I would get in trouble for it, so I kept driving and came back home to my room. I'm glad you are not playing then. Remember, there are no competitive games in heaven. Oh, geez, Anyway, he would say things to trick people into telling on themselves when a lot of things is just stuff he made up. And he got off on all of this. I nodded, hoping he was done and I could be excused. He stared at me hard for a moment. How have you been doing at getting close to Father? He asked. I shot him a look. I was incapable of lying and Warren knew it. I had to drop my eyes as he began reciting to me scripture after scripture and prophets' quotes on obedience to your husband in every capacity. Didn't the man have strokes? Isn't he not capable of procreating? Why is she still expected to get close to him? The way I would not be able to, when I say that there is no way that I would be able, none. Wives, submit yourselves to your husband as to unto the Lord, for he is your Lord. I hate, you're just going to use everything out of context. Got it. Wives, seek not to set in order your husbands. He went on, not putting the full context to whatever scriptures he's using and putting a spin on it, is what I'm guessing, because that's what it's sounding like here. I couldn't believe it. He couldn't pin something on me I hadn't done. So he had to push the button of authority as far as sexual acquiescence and obedience to my husband. I kept my head down, biting my cheek during his 20-minute discourse. Thoroughly pleased that he had reduced me to nothing again, he let me go. I fled to my room to stew, but after an hour I snuck out, got permission from Nephi to borrow a family car, and drove over to Uncle Fred's, where I stormed angrily into my mother's room. Her door was already open, and as soon as I had shut it behind me to ensure I was out of earshot of Fred's family, I began whispering angrily. You would not believe what that big jerk said to me today, Mom. Warren is now dictating that My mother gave me a mortified look. Oh, Lord. And frantically motioned around the corner. I had no idea that Ben Musser was in her room putting up some shelving for her. Immediately, I was struck dumb, not just with embarrassment, but with fear. Warren had his spies everywhere. Wait, I think she's married to the brother, to Ben. Y'all, I want to look, but I'm going to keep reading. Ben just smiled at me, then went back to work. I left for home not long after to await the fallout. But Ben never betrayed me. He just kept showing up to help my mother. I blessed him again for his character and integrity. Anyone else would have run straight to Warren in the hopes of getting into his good graces so he wouldn't be crucified himself. In the meantime, our people in Canada were facing a variety of challenges. Calls from Amelia and Bountiful, as well as reports that Warren would read to Rulon, kept us abreast of what was happening. A few years in a row, resources had been scarce, and Winston was testing the mettle of his people so that they would be ready to endure the end of the world, the destruction of governments, and all of Warren's doomsday predictions. Amelia and her family had to survive temperatures below zero with no electricity, no gas, and little wood. Food was rationed as if a famine existed. They were growing weak. Mom and I sent extra supplies of material, diapers, vitamins, and simple things like hairspray, which we brought in cases to the Jeffs property. FLDS women used so much to strictly maintain the tidy yet elaborate styles that were encouraged by Warren and the rest of the FLDS leaders. Mom and I weren't allowed to compromise their fast, so we sent no food. I was furious with Winston, especially because the last time I had seen him, he was no thinner than before, meaning he probably has them fasting while he's continuing to eat. We just read about that very thing in the last book that I read, section 132, of that so-called bishop doing the same thing. He and his wives and his children did not appear weak or emaciated like Amelia and the rest of the people. I loved many of Winston's wives, and I was sure that watching their relatives suffer was just as painful for them as it was for us. During the spring of 2002, the following year, Warren and Winston had a great falling out. Although they had been strong allies for quite some time, both were young leaders with greatly developed egos, and they had begun to battle for control of the church. Now Winston had found a weak spot. After the world did not end in 1999, Warren had foretold the destruction of the earth at the time when all eyes would be on Salt Lake City for the Olympics, February 8th through 24th, 2002. He said it would be fitting for the Lord to plan it then, when so much attention was being placed on the Mormon faith. God would smite the apostates and the wicked together, showing once and for all that the celestial law was the only pure law upon earth. Once the Olympics had come and gone, most of the people were placated and relieved by Warren's similar pronouncement that we were too wicked to be lifted up, because that's always going to be the excuse whenever he gets it wrong, because he always gets it wrong. And the Lord had granted us time to repent again. I couldn't help but agree, as Winston pointed out, the number of times Warren had wrongly prophesied the destruction of the earth. He also publicly called Warren out for usurping authority from the prophet. Like the Barlow boys, Winston had had direct access to the prophet until Ruland's stroke, access that had been cut off as Ruland's health deteriorated. Winston had been forced to go through Warren to get any answers, and he was no dummy. When he heard about Winston's pronouncements, we were all shocked as we had been frozen into a state of mere survival. The bishop could say things firmly and boldly with the buffer of the hundreds of physical miles between him and Warren, and his own seat of power firmly set in Canada. I don't think Winston was fully aware of Ruland's compromised mental state or how much power Warren had gained over the local people. Warren told Winston it was the prophet's will that he was out, stripped of his title and membership, because everything is the prophet's will, even if the prophet doesn't say it. This is wild. It was clear who was winning in Short Creek. No one had the courage or the authority to question the prophet's son, but our relatives in British Columbia were faced with a very uncomfortable dilemma: Warren or Winston. I was alarmed for our people and especially concerned for Amelia and Brittany. As a student of FLDS history, I knew that it was generally the families and the children who suffered most when people were forced to choose one leader over another. Just like the battle over one-man rule that had ripped families apart, I knew this wasn't just a battle over personalities. It was a bloody, spiritual civil war. Ruland struggled through another series of mini strokes. His health situation was dire, and Warren mandated that my sister wives and I stay with him 24/7. Once again, so he can control everything and watch them. Once again, we were on house arrest, left to stay with our husband while we fasted and prayed for his recovery. Warren pounded in our heads that it was our immoral desires and lack of fervent prayer keeping him ill. And we're going to act like this is an abuse? Okay. We had to be more righteous in our prayers, fasting, and suffering. But he doesn't have to be. Warren, what are you doing? Since you want all the women to do it, what are you doing? Warren and Ruland ate while the rest of us fasted. Didn't I just ask that question? Sorry. Didn't I just ask that question? Having only sips of water, weak tea, or apple juice. I felt like we were the Egyptian wives of the Pharaoh, doomed to be buried alive until we perished alongside our husbands. The Jess home already felt like a tomb, and wherever I turned in the gloomy corridors, the darkened, sunken eyes of my sister wives stared back at me. Several of the ladies started fainting and having severe digestive and other health problems. We spent as much time in nursing one another as we did attempting to nurse Ruland. Finally, Warren changed the edict. We were to fast every other week. Still, our long periods of fasting and isolation had taken a toll on everyone's health. Instead of getting better, we were becoming sicker, and so was Ruland. Mary stayed by his side one night, resting only for a few hours when necessary. It wasn't helping. Not a single one of us wanted to admit it, but we were losing our husband and our prophet. On September 8th, 2002, Ruland Timpson Jeffs passed away. He had prophesied that he would never die, and we had believed him. We all relied on the prophet for our eternal salvation, and Ruland had promised he would be renewed. Even as we prepared for our prophet's funeral service and the people mourned, We kept expecting Rulon to bang on the lid of the coffin and demand to be let out, but there was no sound. More than 5,000 FLDS members attended the funeral services for the prophet. Afterward, Warren asked the people to allow immediate family to view the interment, promising that they could come and pay their respects when it was over. More than 60 of Rulon's wives, his children, and a few close great-grandchildren gathered to see Rulon's wooden casket lowered into the ground. My sister wives and I sang A Choir of Angels, one of Rulon's favorite songs, a cappella. It wasn't until dirt was shoveled onto the enclosure that we looked at one another with wide eyes and the frightening realization that our husband and prophet was truly gone. And even frighteninger, now you got to deal with Warren. And more than likely, because we already know based on other books, he's going to take y'all wives and take some of y'all and give the rest of y'all to others. On the way home in the van, as we were coming up the hill between the cemetery and the Just property, a deep, tangible fear grew within me. Most of us had remained in a state of devastation for several days and were terrified by the thought of living without Rulon. Not that living with him had been that grand, but the unknown felt much worse. For me personally, Rulon had provided a powerful layer of perfection between myself and Warren. I knew that now I would have to pay the price. Warren's usurping of power over the last 4 years meant that the transition to full power was fairly seamless. The day after Rulon's funeral, he continued speaking for Father, and then stunned the entire congregation, who had gathered for instruction, song, and prayer, when he curtly announced, hands off the prophet's wives. I was shocked and still numb, but so grateful. I had been old enough to remember the power plays involving Uncle Roy's wives after his death. Everyone had wanted one of the prophet's little darlings, and within just a few weeks, the women were placed with new men and families, hardly given a moment to grieve. I was relieved that Warren was granting us time and safety. That night in family class, Warren spoke for hours on how we should go on with our lives as if Father was still there, that it was what he would have wanted for us. He even said if we were faithful enough, we would see Rulon walking among us. I felt that same tremendous sense of relief. Like a nun married to Christ, I could simply be married to Rulon for the rest of my days. Girl, I don't believe it. Y'all tell me what you think. I don't believe it. It might have been an odd thought for a 26-year-old woman, but the idea of being bedded by another man terrified me. Warren's proclamation settled my nerves. Because of this, I was not prepared for what was about to happen. The week after Rulon's passing, my sister Brittany called me from Bountiful, her voice full of concern, as she told me that Winston proclaimed that Rulon was dead. Warren would have free reign over his father's wives. At Brittany's words, my blood ran cold. When Rulon passed, I had been secretly relieved that I would no longer have to be violated at the hand of God. To have to face that violation again with someone else was beyond what I could handle. There are many of us praying that Heavenly Father will have mercy for your fate in the desert, Brittany said, but there was little comfort in her voice. Becky, my husband has so many wives he doesn't even bother to spend the night with just one of us. Her voice broke. He simply hops from bed to bed, treating us like whores without even the dignity of holding us in his arms for even one night after relations. With a start, I realized what it had taken from Brittany all these years not to crumble under the strain. Jason Blackmore should be taken out back and beaten with a hairbrush. I recalled how at the beginning of their marriage, he had forced her to submit before she was ready, and now she was expected to keep sweet and be grateful for any morsel of affection as he jumped from wife to wife in the night. As I placed the phone back on the receiver, a great anxiety swelled up within me. Christine had come into my room as I had been on the phone with Brittany, and she was half reclining on my bed. You don't think we'll be forced to remarry, do you? I asked, confiding my worst fear to her. Do you really think we'll have to be placed with another man? I looked into her beautiful dark eyes, hoping for some verification that this was all nonsense and foolishness. Instead, I was shocked to see a wistful smile upon her face. I've actually dreamed that I would marry. Nodding matter-of-factly, she added, I dreamed that I would marry Warren. Oh, goodness. Girl. What? I cried, surely unable to hide my disgust and disbelief. Warren? Christine was much too young and too beautiful to be a widow forever. And though I couldn't blame her for desiring a younger husband and children of her own, I was sickened by her response. Yes, she said. I think it's what Father would want us to do, don't you? She stared at me pointedly, and I could feel my temperature rising. I had visions of Warren jumping from bed to bed like Jason. The heat moved from my head into my belly, and like a volcano, indignation burst from deep within me. If you think I will be part of a herd of cows where a wild bull runs rampant among us, openly mounting one cow, then moving on to another and another and another, well, you're wrong. I will have some dignity and jump the fence. There was only one context in which I would have preferred to be treated like an animal. Why couldn't I be put out to pasture like older wives after our husband's death? Those past childbearing years didn't have to face this this gut-wrenching dilemma. I could easily live with Mother Marilyn, Mother Ruth, and Mother LaRue, and the other older wives. I honestly believed in my life and religion, and I would have been content to spend the rest of my days cooking, cleaning, and serving others as long as I didn't have to go near a bedroom with a man in it. Why the hell would you base a decision like that off a stupid dream? I threw my notebook on the bed, highly disturbed at all Christine was suggesting. I began having a very ominous feeling building in the pit of my stomach. That Sunday, I was called again into Warren's office because more than likely, her sister snitched on her. I can't remember if Christine's her sister. Either way, Christine snitched on her. He got right to the point. Mother Christine came and talked to me. I froze, then tried to act casual. Oh, yeah? What did she say? Warren gave me a rather sanctimonious look. She told me everything. My heart sank, and I was furious with Christine. No offense, Uncle Warren, I said. I could not marry you or any man. I waited for him to explode, but instead he grabbed a nearby garbage can and began clipping his fingernails over it. Aside from the clip, 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 there was total silence. I know I could have been more obedient when Father was alive, I finally began, but Warren stopped me. Mother Becky, I want to put your concerns to rest. No one is going to be forced into anything. This household will carry on as if Father were alive. My heart jumped in relief. He went on, I'm going to ask if you have a problem with me. You go directly to me. Don't go to Christine or anyone else. Just come directly to me. Something ain't sounding right. It took me several moments to respond. If I didn't have to run away from violation, I would no longer look for reasons to be gone. I would seriously commit myself to doing just what he asked of me. Well, okay then, Uncle Warren, I said. He looked up at me, surprised. I will ask you for the same consideration. Stop fishing. Stop going to others for reports. Come straight to me, and I will tell you the truth of what is in my mind and my heart. Hopefully, he would be able to understand that 99% of my rebellion had been about being with Rulon in the bedroom, and that if I no longer had to worry about being raped and violated, I would be obedient to him. I stood up to excuse myself. Mother Becky, Warren prompted, what would you do if Father's wish was now for you ladies to be remarried? He's so full of crap. I looked at him fiercely. I will tell you one thing. I will not say yes to something that I didn't agree with or feel I can succeed at. In my mind, marriage meant sexual submission. I never wanted to be with another man, not ever. Warren nodded. I just wondered, he said. Remember, no one is going to be forced to do anything. For the next several nights, however, I could not eat or sleep. Warren began intimating that he had changed his tune. His words were in direct opposition to what he had told the people, and then what he had told me, but in a devious way. Ladies, consider in your heart that you might be called to do something that will not feel right to you. he said to us one evening in class. He's using what she said against her and twisting it. Is this gaslighting? What is going on? Consider it prayerfully. The minute you revolt from anything that comes from God, you will be under the power of Satan, not be able to resist. One night, Father is going to have you do some things that you may first reject. I'm telling you, be silent and pray for a testimony that you will not reject and that your heart will be open. This is some sick stuff. If you are pure in heart, you will know that this is the truth. This is the next step. I sat there, unable to believe how this man was so adept at twisting words and using our beliefs against us for his own purposes. When we obeyed him to the letter, he called us Father's heavenly angels. If we voiced a single fear, however, he would say that Satan was finding a place in our hearts. Of course, we wanted to be angels and keep sweet. My head and my heart hurt, my bones were aching, and I had the most awful stomach pains. I had developed ulcers like many of my sister wives. Several sleepless nights later, I went to the kitchen to find something to alleviate the pain. They're so stressed out, and he's caused so much bad stuff happening in their body because of the long fasting periods and all these things that these young girls have ulcers. My sister wife Amanda was in there too, having the same problem. The rest of the house was silent. I hugged her, noticing the circles under her eyes mirrored mine. Amanda, you don't think we're going to have to be required to remarry, do you? She started to cry. Becky, the last time I helped Father was in the last 2 weeks of his life. Father was laying down, and Mary and I were rubbing his legs to help him with the pain. Suddenly, Rulon pulled himself up with great strength and grabbed Mary by the shoulders. Mary, promise me you will save yourself for me. What are you talking about? She cried, and he said, promise me that if something happens to me, you will totally save yourself for me. Nothing will happen to you, Father, she cried. In other words, he don't want his son to have his wives. That's what that is. You're gonna live for 150 more years. You said so. Then Father shook her shoulders hard. Promise me, no other man will have you. Okay, I promise, she said. Amanda looked at me with the same desperation I was feeling. Becky, I cling to that. I cling to that. I clung to that as well. In the meantime, many people, especially in Canada, began to murmur that Warren was not the rightful leader of the church. Warren addressed these rumblings at the annual breakfast my sister wives and I had at Maxwell Park in honor of my and Rulon's anniversary. We would have been married 7 years. These breakfasts were always a special occasion, though we had them often, as we had 65 of Rulon's unions to celebrate. Naomi took notes as Warren spoke. Before Father passed on, he set in order this situation. Warren began referring to Canada. The opposition is going to say that it was not Father that made the corrections on Winston, that he was not able to make decisions, that it was Warren who did it. I looked around at my sister wives. They knew as well as I did that Rulon had deferred everything to Warren. Thus, it all comes down to whether they have a testimony of the prophet and that he does right. I say to us, make sure your testimony burns bright. In other words, lie and say you got a testimony. Yeah. The other night I talked to you about how the priesthood succession takes place, how the previous prophet has already, by revelation, appointed the next prophet. Even since Father's passing, think on the testimonies you have heard and how you felt and why Father is doing this among you, so that his family will stand firm and not be divided. This is why you must stay close to home where the priesthood can guide you and that you won't go off and join in the all fearful and doubting conversations among the people. Not only were we not to question, he asked us to become sweeter and even sweeter. I kept concentrating on the people and my desire to hold them together, but my body language could not lie, and my brain could not compute the way Warren was twisting his words to sound like the new truth. Unbeknownst to me, on Friday, October 4th, 2002, Warren wrote in his priesthood record. I talked to Leroy Jeffs today. I told him to seek testimony of what I was to tell him of the Lord and Father, that some of Father's ladies would be sealed, many to myself. And I told him one to him, as far as I know now, that he needed a testimony of his own, of the authority to perform that work, and that it was Father's will. He immediately expressed that he believed and would support the directive, knowing that Father would tell me what to do. I said this to him as we walked along outside at the school. I just yearn none of Father's ladies will fail this test that is coming on them. But I feel like when a sealing takes place, most would come yearning to do Father's will. All but one seems to be converted, and that is Mother Becky. She said how she felt. He used it against her. He did that whole ploy thing where he's acting like this is the will of Father and yada, yada, go. And now, once again, she's ousted. 1 month to the day after Rulon died, my entire belief system was shattered. At 6 a.m., Warren's voice sounded over the speaker. Good morning, ladies. This morning, good words will not be over the intercom. It will be in the living room. All of you come up. I thought. I threw on one of my long dresses and socks, not really bothering with my hair. When I arrived in the living room, several ladies were already seated, and I chose to sit on a recliner. Warren walked into Good Words class, bouncing on his heels and grinning from ear to ear as if he had won the Nevada State Lottery. Most of the ladies in the room looked at him as mystified as I. 7 of you ladies married me last night. Would you 7 please stand up? Immediately, 7 of my sister wives rose to their feet while the rest of us looked on in shock and disbelief. They stood there, giggling like young schoolgirls. I couldn't stop tears from racing down my cheeks onto my dress. Mother Paula, Mother Aura, Mother Naomi, Mother Melinda, Mother Tammy, Mother Kate, and even Mother Kathy were standing. Once I thought about it, I was not surprised to find Naomi in the first batch of Warren's wives. Yeah, because she lies for him too. But I found it significant that Mothers Paula and Aura were the first ones who served as examples to the rest of us. And his marriage to Mother Kathy, known previously in the community as an avid follower of Winston, was a clever, strategic move on Warren's part. Jubilantly, Warren described how each of these women had come to him in private, feeling like they were supposed to be married to him. They continued giggling as he spoke, while the rest of us sat there, bewildered. We are all going to go on a honeymoon trip to play baseball at the park. This is the next step for you ladies. This is what Father wants you to do. These 7 women came to me, then told us to pray, and Father would tell us who it was we were to marry. These women are so pure, they received Father's revelation first. Oh my goodness. So now he got the ladies in on it too. This is Father's will, and I'm just his little boy. I'm just his little boy. He threw his hands up and shrugged his shoulders. I glanced over at Christine. She had told both me and Warren about her dream of marrying him. Her face betrayed her sadness that she was not among the first 7 of his wives. There would be more, though, and I would bet it on my life. My stomach turned violently. Not only did our scripture forbid men from ever marrying their mothers, something about the whole thing just felt sick. I told everyone I didn't feel good and begged out of going to the honeymoon celebration at the park. Up until that point, I wholeheartedly believed in my religion. I did not like Warren, and I did not agree with his maneuverings, but I believed I was in the truest church the world had ever known. Had we been told that the next step was to drink purple punch filled with cyanide, I would have done so without question. Now, I was questioning everything. Even though I'd heard from Warren, no one is going to be forced, there was a horrible gnawing at the pit of my stomach. Over the next several days, I hesitated to go to Good Words class. Each day, Warren would show up with more of my sister wives on his coattails. I couldn't help but be repulsed. My sister wives were disappearing, and not just from our household to Warren's. In the last week, we had woken up to find Emma gone, and no one knew where she was until she showed up later with Warren's brother, Leroy. They were both thrilled, and my heart delighted that she had found a kind man, though it was sobering for the rest of us to lose her. At church, Warren carefully used testimonies of the prophet's last days to sustain his power from the pulpit. He had Isaac testify how Rulon had pointed at Warren and told Isaac, "You follow that man. You follow that man." Then, for the very first time, Warren had Naomi stand up to give her testimony. I could count on one hand the times that a woman had spoken in the church, and I wouldn't use all the fingers. Naomi testified that Rulon had said, if anything ever happens to me, follow that man. So which is why she got married to that man. The destructions of 2000 and 2002 had never happened, but now I felt the ground trembling violently under my feet. At least with Rulon, we had generally known what to expect. Warren was a loaded gun. That's where we're ending it. Good grief. I got an hour out of me. This is insane. Each chapter just gets crazier and crazier. And I'm going to have to put a trigger warning up because that first part had me in shambles. Anyways, let me know what you thought about this. Like the video as it helps the channel. This man, yeah. Until next time. Peace.